Welcome back to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela and this is Kat.
Hello.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter. I think that's it. Maybe somewhere else. We'll see. Remember to follow or subscribe and share with your friends. On the
YouTube.
Monday. Oh, yes, YouTube. Thank you. Somewhere else. So subscribe. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes. So today's topic, in light of so many things that are going on right now, is how do we change minds? And so how do we do that? Everybody wants to do it.
Well, of course. I mean, if everybody would think like I do, the world would be a perfect place.
What? I actually have a quote in response to that. David McRaney says in his book, because no organism can perceive the totality of objective reality, each animal likely assumes that what it can perceive is all that can be perceived. So objective reality, whatever it is, can never be fully experienced by any one creature. Whew. But we as humans, even between me and you, I'm going to acknowledge a fault here. I think you think like I do.
We share a lot of the same ideas. We there are some differences, but yeah.
But do you know everything that I know?
Oh no, and I know you don't know everything that I know.
Right, but when we're in these conversations, like if I were to say, "Oh yeah, I think we agree on most topics," I think when I think of that, I think for some odd reason that you know all that I know. Isn't that right?
It is interesting, and not to get into it, but even the other day you revealed something to me, and I was like, what? And I think you know what I'm thinking about. If you don't,
I think maybe.
But I think the thing here is that I think we've both come to realize, and as we go on this journey of life, I think we've come to realize how much we don't know.
Yeah, and that I think also that we have in fact changed. Maybe our beliefs in high school or young adulthood. If I look back, I realize that I don't have some of those same beliefs anymore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we can't help but change, I think, if we're open to that, if we're open to the learning of experiences and being willing to change our own minds about things when new information comes in, new experiences come in. We meet different kinds of people. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we let those people into our world, we let some of their experience come into the world. And then in turn, we experience that world differently. And so we change our minds. If we're closed and say this is the only way, then we're stuck, and we could be stuck in that same mentality that we were.
Right. And you said something really interesting. Someone comes into our world, et cetera, et cetera. We experience the world differently, then we change our minds. Really, I'm emphasizing the we change our minds because I think it has to be us. I don't think someone else changes my mind for me. Maybe I learned something new, maybe I have a new experience. Ultimately, though, it's up to me to decide.
Right. So if we're, you know, again, it all comes down to us making the decision.
Mm-hmm.
How to
Mm-hmm.
change minds? Well, first and foremost, I think the realization is there's only one mind that we can really change,
Mm-hmm.
which is our own.
Yeah. So when I'm certain that I've got the right way of thinking, and I come at you with, you have to believe this is the right way to believe, what does that bring up in you? If I were to basically say, your beliefs are wrong, and that's that, and I'm right, what does that feel like?
Well, first of all, it feels like I don't have my own agency. You're trying to force me to believe something that you believe. Um, and then I can choose to believe, am I wrong? Am I wrong for thinking this way? Am I wrong for believing differently?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see that a lot. I mean, when I was younger, I knew that the opinions of other people mattered. And so I would be insecure in my own self. And
Mm-hmm.
am I wrong or am I right? And instead of really examining what the person is saying, where they're coming from, examining my own experience and doing that. Now that I'm older, I have much more capability to do that.
So you said
Um,
something really interesting in about how there was this insecurity in the belief, like, am I right, am I wrong? And I'm wondering if maybe that's not a strength, um, because I think from that place maybe it helps us to be curious about where we do stand.
well, for me, it has served me well.
Uh-huh.
Early in my life, it led to that kind of indecision because I wasn't necessarily taught to use my own thinking. I wasn't taught to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was, in the home, you do what your parents tell you to do. You don't question, kind of
Right.
thing. And so, coming from that, point of view is I saw things that I was like, raised questions in me. It
Mm-hmm.
was, am I
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Now at this point where I know I can critically think about things and try and keep an open mind to them and listen to other people's beliefs, sometimes with more success than others, depending on the topic. Um, I can, I can look at things with a more critical eye and then
Mm-hmm.
re-examine my own beliefs and say, am I right? Am I not right? But I also have a wealth of experience,
Mm-hmm.
which when you're younger, even if you were taught to think critically, you may not have that experience
Mm.
to integrate that. I mean, like a child with a hot stove. We know if you touch a hot stove, you're going to get burned. So we share that experience. Don't touch the hot stove, you'll get burned. But if the child who's never been burned doesn't know that,
Right. They still might just touch the hot stove, which,
right.
so, and I'm going to reach out, I'm going to say hi to Trevor because he said hi to me. And today, apparently, I am not cousin. It's okay. I love it. I can handle it. Sometimes I'm cousin, sometimes I'm not cousin. So today, I guess my sister gets to be cousin. It's okay. We'll take it. Maybe none of us get to be the cousin. We don't know. It just it's whichever day it happens to be. So hi, Trevor, not cousin today. But I think like because I think too when we're young, at least for me, I had to borrow or I would borrow from other people's ideals, uh,
Mhm.
and I think I had to. Um, I think even with critically thinking, it wasn't about. I could critically think, but I couldn't recognize the emotion behind the critical thinking, right? And there is that emotion,
Mhm.
and was I okay with being wrong to someone else, right? So if I made a stand, then clearly there would, or ultimately, or eventually, I was looking for a word, there would be someone who was going to say that was wrong. And could I withstand that? Could I withstand being told that's wrong and still be okay with my decision and where I stood? And furthermore, was I okay with the potential of changing my mind later? And could I be open to that there was any information that might change my mind later? And I think like even our politicians get locked into, well, you said this back then, and now you're saying this. And we forget that we also change our minds, and many times we're not even aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But they had it recorded, so.
Right. And I mean, and that's it. And that one of the things to how do we change our minds? The realization we can only really change our own.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, and we also have to allow in our own mind for other people to change their mind. Just as we are not static and fixed.
Right.
Who I was at 18 is not who I am today.
Yeah,
Um,
who I was yesterday is not the same
it,
person I am today.
exactly. Um, and allowing for other people to change because information comes in, situations change, their minds can be changed
Mm-hmm.
about that. So, in looking at these issues, I mean, people like things to be black and white because it makes life easy. And the reality of it is either it's all gray or it's the colors of the rainbow. It's everything in between.
And that's not an easy place to live. That's a very complex, I think that's a complex world to realize that it is a rainbow, that we can change, that things aren't what they were yesterday. Um, you know, in fact, there's another quote from David McRaney that talks about the fact that reality itself, as we experience it, isn't a perfect one-to-one account of the world around us. The world as you experience it is a simulation running inside your skull, a waking dream. We each live in a virtual landscape of perpetual imagination and self generated illusion, a hallucination informed over our lifetimes by our senses and thoughts about them, updated continuously as we bring in new experiences via those senses and think new thoughts about what we have sensed. I like that quote because it points out that we are ever changing and that in our minds, going back to kind of what we started with, the part of the conversation we started with is I might think you and I talk about the same thing. And if we don't check each other, are we really sure that we're talking about the same thing? Right. Like
Right.
the dress, the gold and white dress,
No,
or
it's blue and black.
we're still talking about the dress though. You see my point? Like
Right.
we, and I think that's a really difficult place to live in. And I call it the I don't know world.
Right. And here's the interesting. We talked about how we're different yesterday than we are today. Tomorrow is going to be different too.
Mm-hmm.
So what's right for today may not
Yeah.
necessarily be right for tomorrow. And that means we have to stay open to change. So we not only have to change today, but we have to be open to change tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
as new
Mm-hmm.
information comes in. What often
Right.
happens is I find I form an opinion about something, and when I get what I want, everything's good, and then I can go on to the next issue.
Okay. I want to understand because it kind of made me smile and you paused. You said you form an opinion and then you get what you want.
Well, I don't get what I want, I should say.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
that one is actually going here to this quote, a quote by Adam Grant, if I may. The
Mm-hmm.
loudest voices rarely represent the majority. They're usually speaking for the extremes. You won't understand the views of a group until you have invited the quieter voices into the discussion. Don't mistake silence for disengagement. It's often a sign of deep reflection.
Mm.
And the reason I like that is because I think about when I was at work and people would have an idea and they wanted that idea pushed. And I will admit, I was occasionally guilty of that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I would push and I would push and I would push, trying to change the minds of people.
Mm. Yeah.
And not always, but sometimes people would be like, just to shut me up or to shut other people up, people give in. All right, whatever. They
Mm.
might
Yeah. Is
realize
that
it's not that
like?
important to me, so give them what they want. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times too, those voices that, like he said in the quote, they're at the extremes. So it's black or it's white.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or
You know,
gold or blue.
right.
Or
And
white
yeah,
or blue. Excuse
I was
me.
just gonna go there. I was just gonna go there. But okay, so you have this, and there's nothing in between. You know, we talked about the dress this morning. I said, I've noticed it both ways, but I think it depends on the light that I'm in. So
Mm.
changing that perspective, and for me, taking myself out of the experience,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to say, or to my experience of it in that moment, and say, let me look over here,
Mm-hmm.
and I might see it in a different way, or
Right.
let me see your point of view. So for a lot of these, it's been a week with a lot of hot button, subjects coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people fall on the extremes, and there's a lot of voices in the middle that need to be heard for
Mm-hmm.
people to understand the complexity of the issues, because it's not simple. Nothing in life is simple.
Yeah. Well, and everyone has a different perspective. So I think, you know, sometimes, I have to be open to being wrong. And some of the best conversations that I personally have had in my life, or at least the most transforming ones, were ones where someone lovingly showed me where I might be wrong. But it wasn't obvious that they were showing me I was wrong.
And there you have it too, lovingly.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm telling you you are wrong, 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 and then list all the reasons why you are wrong.
Oh, I'm going to
Somebody
dig my heels in and I'm going to be
exactly.
angry. I'm not going to want to talk to you anymore.
Right. Now, you might secretly go back and be like, either, think like, well, maybe am I wrong?
Mm.
No, no. And play that in your mind, getting your own biases in there,
If I have the
confirming your belief
time.
if you have the time, or you might not even want to be bothered. No, you're wrong. So I'm going to dig my heels in. And but if we sit down and we say, hey, I think, I have a different view on this subject, and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the things that were you had put in our little guide here. It's going to take me a moment to bring it up. Don't mean to look away from the camera there. I just
It's
have to
okay.
find it. uh,
Sometimes I think sometimes just while you're looking for that too, it's do I fully understand a topic? Can I?
That's where I was going to
Okay.
go. Yeah. So
Yeah, so it's the third paragraph down, I think.
yes, it is. Yes. So when asked to provide opinions, goes on to talk about here. But when experimenters asked the subjects to explain how something worked in detail,
Mm-hmm.
people tended to go back and update their answers. So they might have asked how to work a zipper or a toilet or a combination lock, and then people admitted they really didn't have time to work. So it's one thing to know on a combination lock you turn the dial.
Yeah, right.
And do that, but actually, how does it open the tumbler and all that? Realize that they don't know the level of detail as to how it exactly works. So when that goes into an area like politics, people, I'm against Obamacare, or I'm
For it, we'll
for,
just use the same thing, right?
yeah, or something else. They may give one or two reasons why, but not really understand behind that what it is. And so asking them to kind of, okay, I hear what you're saying. Can you give me more information on that? And then they really can't.
Yeah.
And sometimes, well, I mean, a great thing is the whole whether or not there was an election reform, or election fraud in 2020.
There's still argument on that.
Right. And people just come back, well, I feel that there is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like,
But so let's say,
and
we're
you
in
can't
a
argue with a
discussion.
feeling. You can't argue with a feeling.
Mm-mm.
But that to me is a sign of a closed mind, because I think feelings are emotions, not an investigation into a belief.
Right. So if someone has that feeling, though, it's I think it would be prudent to wonder about how they came to that conclusion. That because they may have some very valid reasons, but I think I think what I'm trying to say is maybe the loving thing to do is to ask questions,
Right.
about that, and in a way that does not say that, does not give them this hopefully this perception that they have to answer yes, that they can't say no to my belief, because while I think that belief may not be right, I also believe that if I'm coercing someone or basically not allowing them the room to say no, then it's still not a free yes, and they're not gonna that will be like, you were saying, like with the loudest voices, then people would sometimes just give in, like,
Right.
fine, but did they really shift? Did they really
Right.
shift? No. So
Right.
then there's anger, and then we can subconsciously, with that implicit, that subconscious bias or whatever, or anger, do things that actually hurt the situation, and don't make it work, whether we realize it or not.
Right. And I'm thinking of the case in New Mexico where one of the people of the electors just refused outright to for lack, because I can't think of the word, approve the election, certify it. When asked why, well, I think there is. What's your proof? I have no proof. I just have a feeling there is. Now, I come to that, and I think why I'm dwelling on this feeling about changing minds. If people are living in that feeling, and I think you have a quote on this.
Somewhere.
you know what I'm talking about.
Do. I'm forgetting.
The one on ignorance and arrogance.
Oh, yes. Yes. I
Yes.
do have that one right here.
Yeah. So could you cue that up?
Yep.
Since you have it?
It's ready. Do you want me to go ahead and say it then?
Go ahead and say it, then I'll
Okay.
get back to my idea.
What's more dangerous than ignorance? Being ignorant of your ignorance or in denial of it? and that's by Adam Grant.
Okay. There was another one, and maybe I had that one. I gotta look now. We're all over the place today with our quotes here. Uh, okay, no, I don't have that there. But there was also one I think about ignorance disguised as arrogance.
Oh
So
yeah, where was that? Anyway, yeah, it can
yes,
be. Mm-hmm.
so so my apologies to Adam Grant for not getting that quote up. So if we butcher it, that's our fault. Um, but the idea that, so here this guy was very arrogant that the election was fraudulent,
Right.
but he had no proof. When asked, all he had was a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially with people who have positions of authority or power, I think also there's a responsibility here that if you believe something, change my mind. Otherwise, I'm thinking that you're ignorant and you're arrogant. Because
Mm-hmm.
there has to be some kind of proof there.
But
And
even when there's proof, right? There are a lot of times when there's evidence that's just not believed. Well, that's, for instance, I mean, we'll just use the same election, right? The election thing that with we'll use the same person, right? He couldn't even find evidence, and yet it's still believed, right? So just because we have evidence, does that mean someone has to change their mind?
well, no, but the evidence at least opens a conversation.
If I
You
think
know,
if the other person is willing to investigate, because we could show them the evidence and they could just be like, nope, and it's shut down, right?
right. Well, in that case, there's nothing open. Again, going back to how do we change minds? The only mind we can change is our own.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, when I get into a conversation like that with someone who I perceive as a closed mind about a certain topic, I walk away. There's no point in it.
Right.
But for people who are interested in really in investigating things and understanding things and being open, then there is not a forcible change of mind, like in the case of the loudest voices, and you just acquiesce to shut them up. But
Mm-hmm.
there is actually a genuine dialogue and a genuine opening of minds. When I have those kinds of conversations, it makes me rethink my own beliefs, and sometimes they change, and sometimes they're confirmed.
Yeah.
Um, but having that open mind, saying there are different points of view, and coming to that, and still loving that person, even though we may disagree.
Yeah. And I think too, if that person walks away, and they come back later and they've changed their mind, just not being like, how dare you? And coming from that place, oh, well, you said this. So how could you possibly say it's almost like there's a shaming in our culture when minds are changed. And
Yeah.
I think that's really sad, because how are we supposed to learn and grow if we can't change our minds? Or even an alcoholic who drinks all the time is not always going to drink all the time if they decide to get sober. And then all of a sudden they've changed and they're different people. It's not just, and behaviors change, and all of those things change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, I think, a pretty to what's the word I'm looking for? Not direct. Yeah, I can't find my words at the moment. Jeez.
I'm not sure where you're going, so otherwise,
No, I'm trying to say that that's a like an obvious, maybe an obvious thing. When an alcoholic stops drinking, if they're truly in recovery, then they do change later, right? Or we
right,
see them change over a period of time, and then if you haven't seen them for a long time, sometimes it can be like, oh, this is a whole new person.
right.
Um,
Or a woman who's been abused. That when she gets help and when she gets, affirmation that she's okay, that abuse is not, acceptable, her whole demeanor will change.
Right.
Because she feels empowered. And so her point of view will change. Instead of, having Stockholm syndrome with the abuser, she may know, no, this is wrong, kind of thing.
Right.
So everybody changes as their circumstances change and as their information changes, if they are willing to be open to it.
Well, yeah. And for me, if I'm willing to be wrong,
That's a hard one. We could do a whole topic on that. I know we're a little past our
Yep.
our usual
yes,
time.
We are.
But this has been a great topic today, and I just want to say, if you're interested in changing minds, start with your own. Stay open. Stay curious.
My sign. Oh, thanks, Kat. Okay, there's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who've overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing, and really how they changed, right? And you can find that podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
And we'll see you next